Trivedi with Avantika University. Today we have a wonderful guest with us whom I'll be talking for the next couple of minutes to understand his thoughts on innovation. Mr. Vasudev Murthy, celebrated author, former general manager of Wipro Consulting and a management consultant. We had the good fortune of having him over for a workshop on innovation yesterday, and today I could convince him to do a short interview for us, planned impromptu, but given how smooth he is, I indeed thank him very much for agreeing to an impromptu interview at a very short notice.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as I said, thank you very much for agreeing to an impromptu interview right away. There are a couple of questions which I wanted to like your brains on and talk to you about more recent work that you've done. We've seen that you recently authored a wonderful book on Patanjali Yogasutras.
Yeah.
And you've elaborated all the 196 shlokas from the Yogasutras and elaborated. There has always been a question in my mind on how some of the ancient Indic work is relevant for innovation as we see in a more contemporary world today. I'd love to hear from you.
Okay. So that will require that answer. I'll have to break it up in a couple of. First, about the book itself, since you asked about the Yogasutras. When I approached the project of trying to decipher it or trying to simplify, in fact, the title of the book is Yogasutras Simplified, I knew to some extent what I was going to get into. In the sense, it's a huge piece of work, and I was wondering whether I have the competency for it. Nevertheless, I went deep into it, and I was just astonished by the level of complexity of thinking over there. So it's another story of how I went about, deciphering it and then, trying to reduce it to a more palatable thing. But I must tell you, the Yoga Sutras, in my mind, represent the apex of thinking, of spiritual thinking, of cultural thinking of India. It ought to be a required reading for all of us to understand how, we have such great people who have been sidelined literally in the past several years. We come across them accidentally and they work accidentally. Whereas here, 2,500, 3,000 years ago, people have written astonishing pieces of great intellectual, effort. So from that, I learned many things. To go back to the question of innovation. It's one thing to talk about the way, the messages in the book, but it's also another thing to talk about the manner in which Patanjali had structured the whole Yoga Sutra. It's not some kind of random raving about abstract concepts. So it is divided into 4 sections, and he starts by talking about the end goal of yoga first. And then gets into how if that is the end goal, and he described what is the end goal. Next section is, well, now that we know, then how do we go about doing this? Third, risks and rewards. And finally, a kind of beautiful executive summary of the whole issue of state of samadhi. From that, I learned that it is that, and this is probably not the only such text that we have, which is so beautifully structured and rationally laid out. Right? So, first is we have a precedent of structured thinking, of rational frameworks, of very, very objective analysis of practically everything. And then in this particular case, we're talking about something as complex as the mind. So forget about Western psychologists. We have had great people talking about this, the mind, how it is affected, what are the kinds of things that distort it, and how to control it, etc. So clearly, we have a precedent of someone telling us how to look at anything, how to structure your thinking. Again, there are 8 limbs of yoga. And again, the structuring is seen. So we call it yama, which is external behavior. Next is niyama, which is our personal discipline. Third is the body. Fourth is the breath. Fifth is the senses. These are all the bahiranga. So even I'm building up to a point about innovation, but I want to say that here he has taken the gross to the subtle, the external, and we are now at the bridge from the physical to internal. Then the last thing, which is called dharana, dhyana, samadhi. So in the structuring itself, you observe how he moves from layer to layer to layer. Okay? So the first step, therefore, is from point of innovation, and many people have written a lot about innovation. The first thing that we learn from this is how to layer your ideas, how to take it from the macro to the details, right? It is possible to do that. So don't start at the end first. In the sense, don't don't get worked up about the end result, but plan it, get to the next level, and so on and so forth. So that I think is a very, very nice lesson as far as I'm concerned. Now, for this, it requires some amount of detachment. I'm not saying that innovation doesn't involve creativity. Of course it does, but in the case of texts like this, we see that there is a framework available to help our creativity, help us to think about possibilities along the way. So that's the reason I would say this is from just this one, but there's so many others. We don't really have to borrow fantastic ideas from the West. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them, but I'm saying we really have a whole compendium, a huge library, a huge knowledge base, which if you study them, each of them gives rise to lots of beautiful thoughts, which inspires and fertilizes the spirit of innovation.
Got it. Thank you. That's a very wonderful thoughts. And I pick a couple of things from what you just mentioned. You've been a management consultant as well, I'm sure, and there are workshops and engagement that you've done and all that. Do we see going forward then some constructs being built from the work that you've done that you would be leveraging in your own work with your clients, customers, governments, education, whoever else, to be able to test these ideas out and for us to validate? I'm not saying that there's anything, this is not a question of the work that has been done. This is more coming from the fact that things which have not been used, things like Indian knowledge which has been with us for thousands of years. And you've mentioned in our conversations earlier that you've had discussions with people abroad who've commented that this is a knowledge system that is yours, and it is not so much talked about, and it's quite surprising to how we've seen it, right? Do we see from you, further breaking this work down into ideas or into frameworks or into constructs which can be used and leveraged in our day-to-day engagements, workshops, and so on and so forth?
The short answer is yes, but obviously the answer requires a little elaboration. As I said, we are generally on the back foot. Have been hitherto the management syllabus, schools of conventional management have all borrowed lots of ideas from the West. Oftentimes, Indic knowledge is seen as a nice afterthought or a nice option or elective kind of thing. But I think that is changing. In the workshops that I do, for example, I sometimes talk about conducting a yoga session. I'm just giving you a simple example. And I see the very happy response that people have that they'd like to do it. So if there's a dam that's waiting to burst, they just need the right kind of stimulation or kind of signals to come forward. People want it, but we are constrained by thinking over a generation that perhaps we think we are full of superstition. Nothing can be further from the truth. Indic knowledge relies on immense objectivity. There is nothing crazy about it. It's wonderfully thought through. So if you look at just two examples of, let's say, Yama and Niyama. Yama is how to behave in the external world. So those principles, and on LinkedIn, for example, I've given a number of articles about leadership lessons from the Yogasutras, breaking it down to what can we learn from Yama, what can we learn from Niyama. For example, just a simple example, in Niyama, one of the things that they talk about is be content. This is a very interesting thing. As you are, be happy with what you have. It's called santosha. That's the actual thing. It's difficult to translate, but I think you know what I mean. It's being content with where you are. Now, interestingly enough, this is exactly to some extent opposite to our, I've got brainwashing, which expects us to be immensely ambitious, keep running after things, promotions, money, etc. We have been told that those are good things. It is good in its own way, but these are some much more sensible lessons. Now, what is the price for following those kinds of really, shall we say, skewed, signals, bad health, premature aging, all those things are happening. And people realize that much later, from the 40s and 50s, I wish I hadn't been like that. So this is telling you to step back a little bit and look at everything in a rational, sound way. Don't be affected, because the first impact of anger, of being subject, of being a slave to your senses is your breath. Your breath is the first indication that something is going wrong with you, and that's what's happening for most of the people who are on the treadmill of management. Anyway, so these kinds of lessons are found embedded not only in the Yogasutras but elsewhere, telling us the right behavior, how to talk to other people, how to listen, how to be, how to analyze the personalities of people, etc., etc. All this is already available in our index system. And I think we should draw upon it first. To your point about the fact that someone mentioned to me, we have all this index system. Yes, someone did say so and said, look, we're all studying your systems and you guys are not studying it enough. You should be very proud of, the heritage that you possess, which is practically in your DNA. I'm being a dramatic. But, we get certain ideas. For example, thoughts like karma. Okay. Now, this is not a universally even appreciated or understood idea, but most of us in India instinctively understand what karma is. We may not express it the same way, but we get it. Now, those kind of things are good. That if you do good things and don't expect a reward, that's a good thing. We understand. So why are these not taught to us? Well, that is. I think the time has come. People are interested, but there's never been a concerted effort to take it to them. And I think it is changing. That's my opinion.
Got it. Thank you. Before I move on to the next question, a very interesting thought came from something that you just mentioned. And I believe that's a very important point. You spoke about the thought around santosha, right? To me, santosha in the moment sounds similar to detachment. Insofar as when you say santosha, you're content with what you've done and carry on doing what you do. Because if you say, you're driven by ambition, it takes on a different dimension. Do you think that would be, in some sense related, santosha and detachment?
Well, if detachment is not to be understood as being some kind of a zombie person who doesn't care about anything. He also talks about, in this case, talks about the fact that you need to have generally a sense of compassion and affection to the rest of the world, while being content with your own state in terms of money or whatever it is. The more restless you are imagining that you should be like somebody else, the more your mind is going to be in a turmoil. So in a sense, I kind of agree with you. In fact, he talks about it, how to be detached. There is a beautiful concept called the seer and the sea in the Yogasutras. There's not the time for it. But nevertheless, he has gone over this and whatever is happening, how do you detach yourself and not let your senses control you? And these are wonderful concepts. Pratyahara, the fifth limb of yoga, talks about the withdrawal of the senses. And in fact, along the way he says the idea of the senses is to mislead. It is to mislead you into believing that what you are sensing is a definition of you yourself. And so once you achieve the sense of detachment, you're able to, and therefore the whole issue of santosha, you're able to approach any task, any situation with greater equanimity, with greater compassion, with expecting nothing for yourself. These are beautiful ideas. I don't even think I'm doing justice to what I'm talking about. When you read it, you see what profound, illuminated, enlightened men had wanted to tell us things.
Absolutely.
And we thought, no, it's better that it comes from somewhere else. That's very sad.
I completely get that. And this sound actually, this is, surprisingly when I hear this from you, to be very honest, I'm yet to pick up the book and read it myself. But to be honest, the very principles and the very thought that you're talking about is something very, very important for designers and innovators both, who are designing for the world. And there's a lot that can be kind of taken up. I'd like to move on to my next question. Now, we've seen that in the last 2-3 decades, technology industry in India per se has been the bridge to the rest of the world. And a lot of management concepts, innovation frameworks, etc. have kind of flown from there. There are several other sectors in India, if you look at it, as it is, which are in the process of or yet to adopt many of these frameworks. And in that sense, we've been so far as the consumers of those frameworks. Do you think there is a possibility now or in the near future where India could be the producer or creator of these frameworks for the rest of the world, global south, or the places which are which there's a lot of cultural connectivity that India has with?
Yeah. So to begin with, I'll say we should accept the fact, not in a bad way, in a pleasant way, that we are probably a very open culture and have always been. We like new ideas, we adapt easily. If you look at even the NRIs, people who go from here to America elsewhere, they very easily assimilate. There's a sense of openness. Okay, this is a new idea, let me examine it. So that itself, to my mind, is a great compliment to us. We're very flexible. We like all these kinds of things. However, the bad side of this has been also that because of certain distortions in, let's say, past 75, 80 years, we have been made to feel that we are accepting all this because we somehow have a sense of inferiority. We need to. But that's not true at all. It is just the nature of our mind to accept. So now in the past, at least 10 years, I would say, there is definitely a greater sense of confidence, a greater sense of articulation, a greater sense of being able to listen and decide what is right and wrong from various other views that have come. This in turn comes in the past 10 years, at least 10 years, we see this confidence coming up. We can create our frameworks, we can talk about Patanjali. Well, yoga has already been this soft sell for so many years. It's been distorted, it's a different issue. But people already respect us for these kinds of very beautiful bodies of knowledge. From that to other innovation frameworks, and other frameworks, not only innovation, I think it's a very small step. And I think the next 5 years or so, people want to listen to what we have to say. I think that's going to happen. And we can hold our own in any debate on innovation. We are well known to have innovated ourselves. I mean, if you took me to Ujjain, the Mahakal temple yesterday and all, you could see the kind of work that has happened. How did they think of all these things? The kind of sculptures they thought about, the ideas, the aesthetics, the colors, the design principles. These are homegrown, these are intrinsic, a part of Indic knowledge.
Very interesting, you mentioned about Mahakal. You can visit there yesterday. You've been at Avantika University yesterday and today, right? And it's a very interesting observation that you make. That while a lot has been talked about Mahakaloka in the spiritual and civilizational, political context and all that, I'm yet to see anyone talking about it in terms of design innovation, and you bring that point very interestingly. Do you think more of these public spaces would drive a sense of design, of innovation in our regular day-to-day livings, first amongst Indians themselves, and then for them to be able to create, innovate further, build on those ideas and take it elsewhere as well?
I think the short, very emphatic answer is yes. And it's, you don't even have to go to Mahakal. If just by observing this place, which I am right now, in this beautiful building that we have, looking at some of the professors that we met yesterday, you see the interest in typography, calligraphy, design principles from ancient times. I think somehow we have suddenly taken a lot of pride in what our Indic knowledge has to offer. Again, I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with other places, but there's certainly nothing wrong with what we have. So yes, I think that's what's happening. For example, again, going back to Mahakal and the Vikramaditya, all those places we saw, the expression of design over there was not a weak copy of something else somewhere else. It was a very strong, affirmative assertion of the beauty, the angles. You looked at the Vikramaditya we talked about, right? We talked about Kalidasa, we talked about Varamahi, sorry, pronouncing it wrong, but the astronomer. So many of these people have suddenly, the rational points of view, the knowledge that they have is suddenly becoming available to all of us, and we want to apply it. We are impatient in a sense that when can we do this? Just looking around this building, painting, the color combinations, all these things, it gives me a great pleasure to see that. And you feel you are in India. This is somehow, a vibrant nucleus of India in so many different ways. So I think the answer is yes. I think, and the design students who are generating from here will come out in the next few years will be the finest ambassadors of Indic design thinking in our opinion.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Welcome.
It was wonderful having Mr. Vasudev Murthy over. We had a wonderful time last 2 days. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this wonderful discussion. Looking forward to more of your works and more of your visits to Avantika University. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.